things. She traveled
Yeah.
because she was able to. I wasn't.
Good morning. This is the Citrus County Planning and Development Commission public hearing for May 5th, 2022. If you'd like to join us at this time, I invite you to please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, please give us the grace to be understanding, patient, and tolerant. With these attributes, we can conduct our work in a manner which will be pleasing to Thee, our county, and its residents. In the Lord's name, amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
The following Planning and Development Commission members are present this morning. Robert Bass, Chair. Stacy Worthington, First Vice Chair. Richard Barnes. David Bramblett. Michael Facemeyer. Kurt Stone. And Carol Scragg, alternate.
Thank you. If any person decides to appeal any decision made by the Commission with respect to any matter considered at this hearing, he or she will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purposes, he or she may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. During public input portions of the meeting, individuals are given 3 minutes, representatives of an organization are given 5 minutes. When anyone wishing to speak comes to the podium, please complete a yellow form to hand to the recording secretary. Please print your name, address, and the number of the application for which you are speaking on the form. The yellow forms can be found at the podium by the door. If representing an organization, a letter of authorization must accompany the speaker. Comments shall be limited to the topics being heard. Please state your name, spell your last name, and give your address for the tape record. At this point in time, this is an opportunity to come forward and address the Commission on any issues that you may wish. Seeing none, I don't believe we have any minutes to approve, and we will go to staff announcements.
The first application on your agenda, V2206, Robert Laundrie has asked for a continuance. If we can please have a motion on that before we continue more.
Motion.
Second.
We have a first by Commissioner Bramlett, second by Commissioner Facemeyer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Sherman, did you have anything to add before I move on?
Nothing else.
Okay. In the absence of the county attorney, I'll go ahead and ask if any members had any ex parte communications on the CPA AA PUD 2207. We'll start with Mr. Barnes.
Site visit.
Site visit.
None.
None.
Site visit.
None.
Site visit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could have an introduction by staff, please, on our first application, which is CPAAA PUD 22-07.
Yes, sir. CPA AA PUD 2207, Chuck Pigeon, First County Road 486, LLC, Clear Sky Rehab Hospital. This application proposes to amend the future land use map and LDC Atlas map, along with an existing master plan, to allow a rehabilitation hospital.
Let's make sure it's in slideshow, and then you should be able to click it. If it's not in that yet, it won't.
Sorry, guys. Of course.
Fortunately, we have our tech expert right here on call.
Yes. Thank you
He's
so
right
much.
there. He's also the one that posts this to YouTube
Okay.
afterwards. For
First one
commercial
out.
said tens and tens of views. We don't even get that.
I love that commercial.
Yeah, I do too. Tens and tens of views, and I just cringe. I love all those commercials. Well, it's a pretty picture, but I realize now it's not really a clear sky. I said I should have waited a different day. That's
Pretty good.
I'll take those clouds over snow clouds any day.
Thank you.
See,
Sorry
he had
about that,
trouble
everyone.
too, so it's all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, next. Here we are. This is what I need to read right here. The site is about 5.1 acres in size and lies on County Road 486 in the Lecanto area. The site is currently designated as PSO PUD and MDR PUD on the LDC Atlas and is requesting GNC PUD. This is looking east on County Road 486 towards County Road 491 with the site on the left in this photo. This is looking west on 486 towards the adjacent YMCA. This is looking across 486 from the proposed site. The site is currently vacant pasture land. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. If the applicant could come forward and make his presentation.
You can go ahead and call up his PowerPoint, please.
Yes.
We have your PowerPoint there, Mr. Pigeon. If you want to show it, you're welcome to.
Morning,
Good
Chuck
morning.
Pigeon with Pigeon Robertson Associates, 925 Southeast 17th Street, in Ocala, Florida. And we certainly thank you for the opportunity to come here. We're really glad to be here and get this project further along and hopefully to reality here before the end of the year. I'm here to represent CR 486 LLC, the property owner, but they do have the property under contract for sale with the Sanders Trust, and we'll kind of explain how that fits together. So, next slide, please.
You have the pointer up there too if you want to advance
Yes.
it on your own.
All
It's
right,
got an
thank you.
arrow. It's up to you.
I want to tell you a little bit about the property. We mentioned that Sanders Trust has it under contract for purchase. They won't actually operate the facility. The company that operates the facility is Clear Sky Health. They have a number of facilities around the southern part of the country, primarily from the area of Texas, Louisiana, and New Mexico. And they currently have plans underway and construction underway in Arizona, in Kansas, and also now in Lecanto as their next thing. And this will be the first facility they have in Florida. So they're very excited. Some of the state of Florida folks from Tallahassee are also very excited to see this new venture coming to the state, which supports a very important population in the state, as we well know. What they do, they are physical rehabilitation and health care in that respect. And they do both inpatient and external to outpatient support. The primarily is post-discharge care as well, so they follow the whole thing from beginning to end. And their clients will come from mostly this region, but could come from all over the state. The facility itself that's proposed to go on the property, and as staff mentioned, the property by this zoning is 5.1, the total is 5.25 acres, but there's 5.15 in this zoning application. We'll show you on the map how that comes together. They would do estimate, based on their facilities elsewhere, about 650 patients a year is what the capacity is for this facility. Whether they'll do that or not, time will tell, but at least they could support that many people coming and going, or external or internal, to help this community. It's a 24/7 operation. It is a hospital designation, ACA approved and certified when it's done. They will employ about 95 folks, new jobs, not all at one time. You know, there's different shifts, 24/7, different shifts come and go, but they'll about 95, just a little under 100 people total. And their average salary is $75,000, but it's going up all the time, and most likely see that later. But we didn't want to overshoot right now, but they were saying it's really more like 85, 90, but we will go on record that it's 75. Next slide. Staff will explain a little more about this, but this is the current PUD master plan, and the area in red is identified as the area that we're proposing to change the zoning to a GNC. Originally, it was for professional service office, which could be doctor's offices and all types of uses as an office setting. And then the back portion was for an ACLF or multifamily. as a more mixed density. We feel that this site is a prime location for a hospital rehabilitation type center. It kind of complements the YMCA next to it. It is a commercial type use. Although they don't need drive-by appearance, they did want to be on a good collector roadway where they could get access. Not so much emergency access, but they do have a lot of ambulatory type process of delivery and transportation, and just easy for the folks to see and get to when they're looking for the facility. Next slide. Staff already showed you where this is. That's a little example of how the facility would fit on the site. It pretty much takes up the whole site. Next slide. Again, there's the facility, but a little bit about it itself, 5.25 acres, but I wanted to point out 5.1 acres or 5.15 acres is the actual zoning application itself. Right next to this site between the YMCA and this property is a 10-foot strip of land that was left there for whatever reason in the future to kind of buffer it. That strip of land, 10 feet, 0.1 acres, is to be left primarily natural. And it will serve as a buffer, although we're not intending and not required to have a buffer. It'll sort of serve as a buffer. In the site plan as well, I just want to point out it's about a 45,000 square foot facility as phase one. We'll house 30 beds for inpatient care. There's another 3,000 square feet planned for expansion that hopefully will take in the future if it's needed. And then the county water and sewer services are available. They'll cook to the county. The on-site drainage will be taken care of, so there's no off-site regional systems needed. And then the accesses, as you well know, is from 486. And there's an access drive you can see in the photo there. That there'll be an easement that'll provide access to the facility. Technically not on the property, but the easement is adjacent to it. Buffering, just to let you know, there's a buffering along 486. We'll see in the staff that we requested originally a 15-foot buffer. However, we've been able to work with the plan and then get the drainage to work, and we can actually believe we're going to get a 25-foot buffer. So we're going to request that this board approve a 25-foot per code, but give us the option to have a 15-foot buffer enhanced to a greater degree of landscaping. They really didn't want the greater degree of landscaping. They didn't want to necessarily hide the facility. I think you'll see next it's worth seeing. But we'll end up with 25, but we did want that option just in case we couldn't do the 25. We couldn't get it to fit. And lastly, we're providing cross-access easements between the YMCA and any future commercial frontage. So that cross-access will be in front of the hospital, and then it'll exit onto the ingress-egress roadway. Next slide. This is the artist rendering of the appearance of the hospital, looking basically from the corner of the YMCA northeast. Try to keep it light colors, a little bit more modern design, and nice landscaping. So just to give you an appearance what it is, some glass and wall construction. You can see the entry, main entry. This is what you're looking at with the drop-off canopy area, which would also serve as any transit type commuter service drop-off and pickup. And the next slide is a bit of an aerial flyover type look. And again, from the same corner looking, just kind of raising up and looking. Again, the facility, the patient quarters and the patient rooms are toward the back in that T shape. And then toward the front is all the areas for the therapy. They have both indoor and exterior therapy. There's an exterior courtyard where there'll be stairs and wood surfaces and concrete surfaces and ramps and handicap type railings, all the things that would need to be necessary to be achieved, and that's what they help them do, re-achieve those skills and abilities. So there's indoor and exterior for this. And I believe that was it. Next slide. And we just thank you, and here to answer any questions, both as a civil engineer, planner, and as a representative for the owner.
Thank you. Ms. Couture?
Yeah, thank you for that. You cleared up a lot of items for me. I know number one, you had suggested changing the condition, and it does match up what you had there. I had put allowing up to 52,000 square foot, but it actually should have been allowing up to 48,000, 45,000 plus 3,000 future. That's correct?
That's correct.
And you also talked about the buffers along 486. That's condition number 4. It did say with the exception of a 15-foot type D buffer without a wall instead of a 25-foot type C, but you added the with the option of the exception of. Is that still an option you're considering? Okay.
Yes.
So condition number 4, where it says buffers shall be provided as outlined on the master plan with the option of an exception of a 15-foot type D. So they're either going to propose a 15-foot type D or a 25-foot type C. Obviously, we'd encourage the C, but as the wider buffer in that area. The other thing was parking lot landscaping. Weren't quite meeting the 400 square foot for every 10 spaces, but did put a condition in there. We'll deal with that at permitting. Did you have any concerns about that?
Yes, it is a tight site. If you have a chance to go back to the main, we've tried to put medians as big as we can. We've left buffers around the outside, and we believe we'll be close, but we may not meet 100% of the 400 square feet for every 10 spaces within the limits of the parking. So
Did you want 350 or something, or?
we'd like to have the flexibility to go to 350. I think we'll meet it, but it's not 100%. It just get tight. What we're trying to do is there's a utility corridor along the western side of the property between the YMCA and this building. It has reclaimed water lines, gas lines, electric lines, probably telephone, and the county's lines there. So we wanted to be cognizant of that and keep large trees and landscaping out of that area. It'll be open, natural, but we can't overdo it with tree plantings. So.
Thank you. Nothing more, sir.
Any questions from commissioners? I have one. Bear with me while I find it. Okay. A letter was submitted dated December 6, 2021. It was in regards to the facility that was in Kenosha, Wisconsin. That was submitted as some type of supporting document. And in there it says radiology service will be contracted with local acute care hospital that is located directly adjacent to the facility. Lab and laundry service will also be contracted with the local hospital. I assume that's not happening here. Everything will be on site, or will there be some type of coordination between one of our two local hospitals anyways?
Well, there'll certainly be coordination between the hospitals. The operator right now is working to determine how much can be done outside of the hospital versus how much they need to have done internally. What are the resources? What are the abilities? What are the availability? So that's being looked at and addressed right now by Clear Sky.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go to.
Okay, Mr. Pigeon did a lot of my work for me, so I'm going to touch on just a few items here. This is the application site, which you've just seen. You can see the Y to the west. I'm glad that's showing up on the aerial now. And this is the application site. There is an existing PUD on there, which we'll talk about a little bit. Just to scroll back a little bit, obviously Walmart is just out of the picture here on the southeast corner there, the bottom right. And just out of the picture on this site, on the same parcel, is an application you'll be seeing shortly. You've seen it in the newspaper with a big retail box office and a lot of commercial. So that's coming to you. It's actually part of this parcel as well. So this parcel does not yet exist. They'll have to create this. So this is the parcel looking at it towards the Y. I put this in there because you can kind of see the signs there in the middle there. That is actually the Y's cross-access easement, and they are connecting up to that. And this is the easement that they've talked about running along the length of the parcel. That will remain, or it's a private easement that really is not part of this application site. This is the PUD that's existing. It is quite older than some of the newer ones we're seeing, but it's not yet expired. So to zoom in on the area, you can see, as Mr. Pigeon talked about, that there are offices proposed here and multifamily and ACLF in that area as well. And there's the cross access to the Y, so that's being continued. ALF, not too unlike what they're proposing here, although this hospital, would have kind of a turnover when people hopefully heal. And this is a rendering that he's already showed you of the site. And this is the site plan. Just to touch on a few deviations, they're not proposing a buffer between the DRA and the access drive. You all have seen that before. That's something I think we'll probably take out of our land development code. We've seen too many deviations that doesn't seem to be warranted anymore. The 400 square foot of the internal parking lot landscaping he's asking for, I just threw out 350. It's a little bit less. Yeah, they're not quite meeting it. They're very, very close. You can see they do have some landscaping proposed there. Other deviations, not a lot. They really are following code very well on this one. Parking spaces, they don't have the LDC required parking spaces. That's not a deviation. They're allowed to do a parking study and show us at the time of permitting that they only need 90 spaces. Our LDC calculates 160. But our LDC is looking at it as a hospital. As this rehab hospital, it's probably got a lot less turnover than that, and I'm sure that they know that 90 is appropriate. But at the time of permitting, they'll be giving that to us. Whoops. So, conditions. Staff has suggested a lot of conditions here, 10 of them. Condition number 1, which we've already corrected, would be 48,000 max, 45,000 current, and 3,000 future. Condition 2 is access would be from 486. Condition 3 would have to meet all large non-residential design standards unless otherwise authorized. Condition 4, we're changing that to buffers shall be provided as outlined on the master plan with the option of an exception of a 15-foot type D buffer without a wall instead of the 5-foot type C along 486. They're also not doing a 5-foot sodded strip between them and the Y. It's kind of there, but not completely. Again, the Y is connecting to it. They're obviously well aware of this, and the cross-access kind of takes that requirement away. I did point out no type C buffer required between the DRA and the access drive. Condition 5, foundation landscaping along 50% of the building, fronting 486. Condition 6, they need a parking study, which I talked about. Condition 7, the parking lot landscaping must meet the standards outlined in the LDC to be demonstrated at the time of permitting, with the exception of 350 square feet per island instead of 400. Condition 8, they do have to create the parcel. This is not a current parcel. And then 9 and 10 are the standards ones that you see on all planned unit developments. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question about the parking.
Okay.
It seems like a tremendous difference between 90 that they're asking for and 160. And I think that that's a huge precedence. I'm just very uncomfortable with that, especially when they're talking about people coming in and out. I have never been to one of these facilities where it's easy to find a place to park.
And we
You
can
go
have
to
the
Grand Living, I've gone around 3 times before you can
yes,
place.
Grand Living.
And I've gone over to several others and the same thing. And this is just such a big difference.
It is a big difference, and you're not being asked to approve the 90. That is part of the process of permitting. They'll have to give a parking study showing that it fits this area. I agree there's a big difference. I'll also say that this is a kind of unique use. This is not an assisted living facility like Grand Living. We can let the applicant address that further, but you're not being asked to approve 90. You're saying, well, they're asking for 90, y'all need to prove it, basically, at the time of permitting. They'll have to give us some examples as to why this is working and some justification.
But could we ask for more than 90 as a condition?
You absolutely can put whatever conditions you want to on there. They are given that flexibility. I'd let the applicant address that before we try to do that, though.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you very much.
I should say it's served by Central Water and Sewer too, which is a plus.
Mr. Pigeon, would you like to address Commissioner Stragg's comments?
Yes, and that was a great observation, and the code is very astute about a lot of parking. They've got a number of facilities all over the country. This type of facility, the people don't drive up there and leave their car and go have rehab. They're usually transported, usually stay there anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks, and they have guests every now and then. Some family will come and visit, but predominantly it's the employees, and it's a few visitors, and it's a doctor or a therapist or something. Historically, they need about 65 to maybe maximum 75 spaces. Lots of aerial photographs, and we'll produce that in the report. And they've done these same reports around. When you take aerial photos and Google Earth and everything else, and you look at these facilities day, from the air, 65 to 75 spaces are utilized. We put in as many as it could fit, and we settled on 90 spaces. They were saying we really don't need more than 80, 85. We got 90 spaces on this site. We think that's more than enough unless we have a big event or some grand opening or something like that. But that's kind of a rare occasion. So historically, not much in the way of parking requires. You don't see specifically on here, but we have several exceeding code by far as far as handicap accessible parking spaces. But just to let you know, we'll produce that report. We'll have the parking study, and it'll show that you just don't need 160 spaces. That's an awful lot. But a hospital is different than this. Just, you know, we are seeking and will seek approval and have the hospital designation as opposed to other type of designation, because it sets that standard of care and that standard of competitive nature, if you want to put it, where no one can build right next to this as a hospital. The same thing, and it also requires more sophistication and review up at the state level for ACA. Hopefully that answers some of your question.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Let's say that you submit this report and staff doesn't agree with your 90 and they feel it should be 115, just picking some random number.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan on addressing that?
Well, the backup plan would be to go back to the adjacent landowners and negotiate to purchase more land, remove that drainage retention area from where it is on the map and turn that into parking, and then try to put the drainage elsewhere and redesign part of the project.
So you have a plan B.
It's a plan B, but it's an ugly plan B.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question. You said that there would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 95 employees, but they would be shift employees. So
Yes.
assuming that only half are on duty at any particular one time, I assume that half would take some of those parking spaces, and so they would take, in essence, half the parking spaces of the half of the 90 available, which would leave Carol's problem of driving around trying to find 40 spaces available for visitors or other staff.
Right. There's typically between 35 and 38 staff, full-time staff on the property. So they would, if everyone drove their own vehicle, it'd be 38 vehicles all the time. Staff, it isn't 38 people work and then immediately 38 people switch them out. There's staff changes throughout the day. They work different shifts. It's not like you got 38 people parking and then 38 people show up and then now all the parking spaces are taken until other people start leaving. But even if it occurred, that's a total of less than 80 parking spaces taken. So there's 90 available. So if during that time someone did come and go and every employee showed up at the same time with their vehicle, there's still additional parking spaces. And this doesn't include loading zones. It doesn't include areas behind the facility where you could park if you had to. It doesn't include people parking on the grass if they wanted to. So it works very well with actually less than 85 spaces, less than 80 spaces. We've got 90.
I have nothing else.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Public portion of the meeting will now be open. If there is anyone present in favor of the application who would like to speak, please come forward to the podium. As a reminder, individuals have 3 minutes to speak and organizations have 5 minutes. When speaking on the application, please address the board. If you have any documentation that you want to be entered into the record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? If there's anyone present who opposed to the application who would like to speak, please come forward. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, we turn it back to the board for discussion and possible action.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Scragg, I also had the same concerns about parking, but I think that both Joanna and Mr. Pigeon have adequately responded to those, and I'm in favor of this application. A rehabilitation center is something desperately needed in our community. Based on my recent experience with a member of my family. So, with that being said, I'd like to make a motion. The Planning and Development Commission finds application number CPA-AA-PUD-22-07 consistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and the Citrus County Land Development Code, and that this board approves with conditions the application based upon the evidence and testimony presented and the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition. It has been determined, oh, I'm reading the wrong one. It has been determined that I am reading the wrong one.
Everything, if you stop right there, was right.
Oh, thank you.
So we can do we have a second?
Second,
Who second was Bramlett?
he was
Well,
first.
both of
Mr.
us.
Facemar.
Pick one.
Okay.
Seniority.
Any further discussion?
That all's cracked up.
And I'll note those are the amended conditions from the staff report that we talked about.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that. I'd just like to add one thing. I agree that the parking is somewhat less, but one comment that Mr. Pigeon made, which kind of struck a nerve, was, well, there could be parking on the grass. If they're going to have to park on the grass, then I think you're going to have to add parking, if that's kind of what you're thinking. So I hope that your report really totally encompasses all the shift changes, visitors, doctors, et cetera, so that we don't have people parking on the grass, because that's the last thing we want, is to have any of our, any beautiful landscaping damaged by people parking on it. So that's just a little side note there. With that, we have a first by Commissioner Worthington, a second by Commissioner Facemar. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll note this has been set for County Commission hearing on June 14th at 5:01 p.m.
Thank you. Okay, our second application is CPA-2201. And I think that one is by,
That one's ours, yep.
yep, and the
All right,
floor is
so,
all yours.
so no PowerPoint, no exciting slides, no videos, sorry.
How
This is,
disappointing.
I know, well, that didn't run so smoothly, I don't know how good that was, but this is addressing open space. You'll recall a little while ago you had a residential subdivision before you that actually had trouble meeting the 20% open space that's in the comp plan. I was hoping Mr. Still would be here today because I can point out that not for once, we don't always agree, but we agreed on this one. So we're on the same page completely on this one, which is great. The open space calculations, now we're the Nature Coast. We don't want to be Pasco or Hillsborough or Orange, not throwing them under the bus, but they have different design standards, and we do for a reason. So we're trying to keep the open space. However, our comp plan prohibits the use of constructed drainage facilities. Back in the dark ages, when those were fenced and very, very steep, that was completely appropriate. Now we're seeing them mostly shallow, sodded. We use them for soccer fields and dog park and anything else you can think of in subdivisions. I know I've used them, everyone else has too, if they're not full of water, but people are probably doing something in there, throwing a frisbee or whatever. So that was the idea, is to take out that prohibition. Taking out that prohibition allowed that subdivision to still meet 20% open space. And you're seeing smaller and smaller lots, so it is going to be more and more a problem. You've got an application coming before you next month with the exact same issue. If they can use some of the DRAs, they're fine. If they can't, they don't. So what's proposed in there, it's actually several elements. Our comprehensive plan is very interconnected, so you change something in one place, it's probably referenced somewhere else as well. It's all meant to have the same goal. So you have a change in the recreation and open space element that says that they need to have, the recreation and open space should not include DRAs unless approved in the planned unit development. And you'll see that throughout, that if it's a PUD and we know that it's designed and the developer tells us it's designed to be open and available to the residents as open space, recreation space, great. You'll see also the conservation element, chapter 3, a change. There's an old remnant in there, to the greatest extent possible, units shall be clustered. That was great for areas where there's lots and lots of wetlands, not so great everywhere else. People like to have things spread out a little bit. So taking that out and telling them they open space is encouraged to connect to open space. You don't want a pocket here all the time. Sometimes it works. And also taking out the, for some reason, non-residential development shall be required to minimize the size of contiguous impervious areas. I think they were trying to address seas of concrete. We wouldn't allow that in a PUD anyway, and we have a lot of standards right now that wouldn't allow that. So that particular item is being proposed to take out of the conservation element. Now, most of the changes are in the future land use element, which is the Exhibit C that you have there, and I did try to give you the cross strike through because that's so much easier to read. But mobile home parks and RV parks also have open space. Didn't want to get the residential subdivisions a kind of leg up, and then mobile home parks, you're on your own. So we did take out the 20%. It's telling them that they have to do at least 10 as recreation. That's already in there. And saying that they do a maximum amount. The reason is if there's a mobile home park, they come before you. They're a master plan. So you're going to see that it's like a PUD. Same thing with RV parks. It's changed from 30% to maximum amount. Y'all are going to look at that on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes 20 and 30 is great. Sometimes they've got so much other stuff it doesn't fit. There's also a policy in here taking out the 20% as provided unless part of an approved plan development. Now, the last line there, talking about affordable housing, is something added by Mr. Stillwell, and I applaud it. It's a good idea. The county commissioners have been discussing affordable housing a month or two ago, and they were very focused on, we should probably allow smaller lots for affordable. We should probably allow a little more density. So this is a nod to that approved affordable housing projects may provide at least 10% of open space on the site. Now, it's at least. It's still going to come before you if it's a PUD, so y'all still have the ability to say, well, 10 doesn't work here, whatever. Same thing, we're taking out the requested constructed drainage facilities. We also took out the word easements. No one would ever even know where utility easements are half the time. They certainly act like open space. And finally, the natural areas incorporated into stormwater management systems may be included, but count for more than 50%. I don't know why there's a limitation of 50%. Again, that's a case-by-case basis. So it's not that we're trying to remove open space completely. We're just trying to take out that hand tie of can't use constructed drainage facilities. And that's it.
Any questions from anyone? In Exhibit C, where we talk about maximum amount in policies 17.323 and 17.6.12, I have a concern that it falls on us to make a determination as to whether or not we think it's enough. Are we creating a potential problem for ourselves by saying, well, Mr. Facemeyer wants 15, Mr. Barnes wants 12, I want 9. There's so much that could go all over the place. Should we say there has to be a minimum and a maximum so that we could maybe save some potential arguments along, I shouldn't say arguments, conversations on what is right?
Well, I think that I see your point. I think that the maximum, first of all, I'd never do a maximum because some are going to be designed as recreation PUDs. We're seeing interest in cabins and things, and so never do a maximum. If they want to provide more open space, yay. As far as minimums, the minimums are here. The minimums are 20% and 30% for the mobile home parks and the RV parks, but y'all have to see those. Those are master plans. They have to come before you. So putting in the 20, this is comp plan, no deviation. Putting in the 20, 30, no, I can't go below it, I think is a little too much.
Okay.
I do think that they have to come, they're a case-by-case basis, and that's why they're having troubles. 30% is a lot in an RV park. We're getting it so far, but we're not getting it in the residential. So I think it's gonna lend to a probably better plan to try to have a little bit more flexibility for those people rather than locking in 30 and locking in 20.
Okay.
That's my thought. But
All right. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Joanna, this thing is before us, is this something that we're going to approve or recommend approval, or is it just some FYI?
no, this is a recommendation to the county commission to change the comprehensive plan. And they have to actually have 2 hearings on this one. That's the statutes. This is the big deal
Okay.
to change text.
The second comment that I have is I'm sure all the proposed amendments will make it easier and more profitable for developers to be able to sell 1 or 2 extra more lots by reducing the amount of open space. But as you first said, we're the nature coast. Do we really want to make it easier to have greater density? Do we want to turn into the villages? Is that our objective? In my opinion, I think it should be 20 and 30%, absolute. You know, you come to Citrus County, they're more rural, more nature friendly, they like open space, and we don't care if you can't sell another 2, 3, or 10 lots. You know, we're going to have more open space, and we don't care. You know, there may be people that don't mind living in a more density, and they will be happy to buy that, but we don't care because the rest of the residents have to drive by it and look at it. So, in my opinion, I'm strongly against reducing the required amount of open space. And I will definitely, if we have a vote, I will vote against this for those reasons.
There will be a vote, so.
Yes, Commissioner Stride.
I have to agree with her completely. I mean, this really lowers the amount of open space tremendously.
Okay.
And just to, I'm not trying to defend it too much, I understand your points. You're going to be asked to see these on master plans, period. You're going to be asked to see them. And the application that this prompted, this board did approve and pass on to the commissioners, who also recommended approval. They're having their final hearing next week. So there are case-by-case basis where 20% is not appropriate. For whatever reason, they've designed it so you can't even tell. It's 18, it's 16, it's 19, but it's close and you can't tell. And then there's other times where 20% should be the hard and fast rule. This is taking out the hard and fast rule because they still have to do that, but they can use constructed drainage facilities if they tell us that. Okay, so I think your concerns more are the RV park and the mobile home park sections.
Correct.
Where we're taking those out, and it just says maximum amount. We can keep it at 20% and 30% and change it to constructed drainage facilities. Do not count towards that if you think that's more appropriate for those items. This still would allow for the residential subdivisions then, the 20. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I would still be against it.
Still be against it, okay.
No, I would agree to that.
Any other comments? Any other questions?
I think it makes sense. I mean, you know, on its face, you add the drainage retention areas, and when we talked about that particular application, and you know, you read through it and you find out and those areas don't apply. And I as a parent have kids that have watched 20 kids run around and play in a drainage retention facility. They play football in them, they ride their bikes in them, they do all of those things as long as they don't have water in them. It's definitely open recreation. And then as far as trying to get into semantics and split hairs with this 20 and 30, like Ms. Katu said, all of these applications are going to come in front of us anyway, or in front of this particular board. And so if somebody comes here and says that, you know, they want to go to 10%, well, first of all, they're going to have to make it by staff on their recommendations when they go, okay, here's what they're asking for. And then they lay out their analysis, which 100% of the time we know which way they lean towards, whether they agree with the application or not. So we'll have that as a backup. So I don't really think that anybody's going to come in here and try and like really deviate and move too far off of what the needle says it should be, because they're going to have to make it by staff, and they have to make it by us, and they have to make it by the county commissioner. So I like the idea. I think it makes sense, and I love it when we fix things and make them better.
Okay, but I don't know as this is making this better. You know, she's already told us that, yes, we have the 20% standard, and people come in and they're going, yeah, 17, 19%, and that's fine. They're still working toward the 20%. We have 10%, then it's coming in, well, 9, 8, you know, it's pretty close. You know, it's just a lowering of a standard that we have now that preserves the open space for our county. You know, it's a better place to live because it's not Sumter County. So.
Any other questions or comments? I have to agree with Commissioner Stone. Are we giving up something that we shouldn't give up? And I'm going to go along with Commissioner Stone. I will not be voting in favor of the change. I think that, you know, I know one of the reasons why I moved down here was because of the nature of the area and the openness and just the feel of the county. And I think that, you know, we're gonna be selling ourselves short by making these changes.
And just
for your
to clar-
information, Joanne,
That's fine. Just to
Commissioner.
clarify, there's Mr. Stillwell. I was going to say we're finally agreeing on something on this, but is your concern in the mobile home park and the RV park change, or overall?
overall,
Just okay.
Overall,
because the standards are still there. They're just taking out the allowance for constructed drainage facilities for subdivisions.
I just, as Commissioner Stone said, you know, 2 or 3 extra lots, you know, adds up here, adds up there, and we're ended up cutting ourselves short. So I want to make sure we have sufficient open space. And, you know, to use the drainage retention areas, I'm not totally against it, but I still think that we need to keep as much open space as we can so we don't end up like some of the other counties where we're shoulder to shoulder, cheek to cheek with everybody, and then we're not enjoying what we have here today. So I'm not going to vote in favor of this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think the project that we were talking about where open space came up before was the project on Rock Crusher?
Yes.
Okay, so that project was, in my opinion, a very good project, and they were using the canyon as a natural amenity, and it looks to be one very good, well-designed project for our community. Now, in that situation, it came before this board, and they had less open space than what was allowable, and that's where this came up. That we noticed that this is an issue. Now, allowing them to use the drainage retention facilities gave them the amount of open space, and it was approved and moved on to the county commissioners, and it's going to be a good residential project for our community. So I think making the changes, like Joanna said, it's not going to affect this board's ability to recommend or not recommend a project that comes before us, and I don't see it changing our community you know, into something like Newport Richey, because we still have the objectivity to take a look at each project on a case-by-case basis. But I think that using the drainage retention facilities to calculate towards open space should be allowed, and I would be in favor of these changes.
Thank you. Just following up on the percentage issue, and I think Commissioner Stone hit it right. Right now we have 20%, and we're saying, yeah, we're close at 17, we're close at 19. Now we go down to 10, and now we're close at 8, we're close to 9.5. So, again, I just think that we're being a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah, we don't do that. And if I misspoke, I apologize. We don't come in here and say, oh, 17's good enough or 18's good enough. It's 20 hard and fast, and it's still 20 hard and fast in a comp plan. So this would allow them to use those drainage facilities to count toward that 20. The only place that it's being removed is the mobile home parks and the RVs is saying maximum amount, you give us what you can. And that's why I'm saying if that's a concern, we can change that. But subdivisions themselves still have 20%. Now the affordable housing would be 10, yes. But subdivisions themselves would still have to meet 20. It's a hard and fast rule. But they could use other areas. They can use natural areas. They can use constructed drainage facilities. That's what this particular application does. It doesn't say, and 17's good or 18's good. It's hard and fast in a comp plan, end of story. But to get there, they can use constructed drainage facilities. I'm sorry if that was confusing earlier. I didn't mean to do that.
If that's the case, then I personally think that I could accept the changes in 17.3.23, but in the policy regarding the RVs, I think we should keep the way it is. And that's my view. I don't know how any of the other commissioners feel.
I'll agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the mobile home parks would still go to maximum amount, but, and at least 10% as rec areas, but the RV parks would be as is, a minimum of 30% of the property in open space. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Barnes.
I agree with everything that Commissioner Bramlett and Commissioner Worthington said. I think it's a good project. I think it's a good change. The only thing that I like to see changed is in Exhibit B, the word encouraged. I mean, what's that mean? You know, you're going to make me encourage something, and I don't want to be encouraged, so I'm not going to do it. So why is it in there?
Well, right now it says shall be connected to, and I don't think that open space has to be connected to a corridor and a network like this was originally proposed. So trying to say, if you want to do that, that's great, we'll push you and say, go for it.
But if not, I don't want to do it, so you're not going to make me do it.
No, I'm not going to make you, because I don't think we should make you have open space connecting in a corridor of larger areas. That's a way outdated thing that pocket parks are real, and they're perfectly fine for a lot of subdivisions. So making sure that you absolutely connect all those, which is how it's currently worded, no.
Well, I'm in favor, to further make the changes as written.
It's a good planning term too, encouraged. No.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, do we have a
You
motion?
gotta open it to the public. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. If there's anybody in the public who would like to speak on this, please come forward at this time.
Good morning, Clark Stillwell, 320 South Highway 41, Brandon Bank Building in Inverness, Florida. And I'm speaking generally on behalf of 3 or 4 multiple clients who are impacted by this rule. I just want you to know a little bit about the origin of the rule. It is from 1990. It was part of the stipulated settlement agreement in 1990. And you just can't read this particular policy singularly with blinders on. You have to look at the whole comp plan. And in 1990, when this rule was passed, there were specific standards in the recreation and open space element that dovetailed with this. And in the open space and recreational element, you had objective criteria for a residential subdivision. To give you an example, if you had a 500-unit subdivision under the 90 plan, the mandate was 5 acres of active recreational area. If you had 1,000, it went to 10 acres. And to further give you an example, a community park is approximately 25 acres in your comp plan and per your impact fee ordinance, and a district park is 100 acres. So in the 90 comp plan and in the current comp plan, there's a whole series of maps that designate open space in the sense of public open space. And when I say that, I'm talking about parks, conservation areas, Carl lands, Withlacoochee State Forest, etc. And in both the 90 plan and in the current plan, there's not a deficiency in Citrus County of what I'm going to call public open space. That's the Withlacoochee State Forest, Carl lands, those lands east of 41, west of US 19. Your planned service area is 109,400 acres, according to the plan. Of that, 40,000 acres in the planned service area, where everyone wants all the development to go, where the utilities are, 40,000 acres is committed to open space. So that's the public type perception. Now, I've got 3 projects going, and you talked about Crystal Ridge, and Crystal Ridge, which goes back in front of the Board of County Commissioners next Tuesday. The initial submittal was like 15, 14%. We re-twigged it, Mr. Pigeon did, not I, and got it up to around 16.5. If you include the drainage retention areas, and there's about 10 of them, and only one is less than an acre, and one of them is over 15 acres, it goes to 24, 25%.
It's not really that kind of application, so
Okay.
we're not quasi, so
Oh,
we're good.
sorry.
No, you're fine. I should have said that earlier.
That's the way to do it.
So you can see the impact. In Crystal Ridge, the 20% rule means 70 acres of open space. All right, so that's almost a district park. Your rec element right now only requires 1 new district park in the planning period through 2030. But Crystal Ridge's got to put 70 acres in. If you put that on top of the rest of the requirements, it gets a lot higher. Lecanto Preserve, you haven't seen that yet. You'll see that June 2nd. 139 acres, 608 units, 27.8 acres of open space. Does not include drainage and buffers. You add drainage and buffers to that 27 acres and you get up to 30% open space under the current rule. And that's right next to Crystal Glen. A more telling example is the King Trust. We had a pre-ep on that a month ago.
It's all blurring together. I don't know. I can't keep track anymore.
And we got another one next Tuesday. King Trust is 747 acres. 20% of that is 150 acres. Now, if you do 20% plus the drainage, you're close to 200 acres under the current rule. You can see the impact. Again, a district park is 100 acres, but the King Trust piece would have to set aside 200 acres of open space, and they don't even have the impact or demand that a district park was. So the rule really has this application in a time when perspective on planning was completely different. And I say that now because this rule is the antithesis of affordable housing. If you have to put 20% into open space, plus the drainage, plus the buffers, your density goes down and your price goes up. It's that simple. And anyone you talk to will tell you affordable housing, the cure is density and intensity. So we support the change. The PUD, I'm not in love with for every project. I think smaller projects, why make them do it? But I try to give you a perspective here where we're at. The amount of open space we have in this county, you got 48% of the people, or 48% of the acreage does not pay taxes because it's either government, not-for-profit, or open space. That's a lot of open space. Any questions?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Attorney Stillwell. How many total acres did you say was in the PSA?
109,400. And you can find that in your, in the Central Ridge area, 109,400 acres, of which 39,956 acres are currently what they call conservation or open space, and there's 50,000 acres of some of residential.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Stillwell, excuse me, I apologize, but some of the members had some concerns about opening except for PUDs as far as then going less than the 20% for residential. Can you address that from a development perspective?
Well, a majority of your bigger subdivisions, okay, and I'm going to say 400 units and up, are going to be PUDs, simply because of lot size issues like you saw in these last ones, and an averaging of lot size. So I don't mind the PUD for the bigger units, okay? The smaller ones I'm concerned about, but as far as open space is concerned, each site is different, truly, and not every site has a rock crusher canyon in it, okay? The King Trust, I can guarantee, is nothing but pine woods and sand hills. There's nothing unique about that. And so, that being the case, the King Trust should be held to that standard. But there may be that one rare exception where you might want to deviate from that, and not because the developer wants it, because of the public good wants it. So, never say never, okay? And just remember this, it's a PUD, okay? So you're gonna see it, and the Board of County Commissioners is gonna see it, and the public is gonna get noticed, both the butters and everybody. So if they're at 18% and there's a really good reason, that might be worth considering, but if otherwise they should be. Generally meet that 20% standard, and we can meet the 20% standard in these three examples I've given you. and do really good projects. We just can't meet it with the drainage retention areas being deleted, if you will, and the buffers.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
I'll bring you my slip in a minute. Karen Esty, Inverness. It's always been my understanding that DRAs were there to protect from flooding. And I think that's the purpose why we put them there. And I think, in my opinion, we are going to shortchange the people who are buying into these subdivisions for their children to play, to say DRAs can be used for recreational use. They're there for flood protection only. And to say that children can play in them, that may be the case from time to time, but I would hesitate a child going into one of these DRAs when, after everything that goes in there from fertilizers and pesticides and any other residue that may be drained into them, and it accumulates. So I would be hesitant to have somebody have a child go in there and play for them. And I think it's going to shortchange also in the future. When we have developers come into this county, I think it's a privilege to come into this beautiful county and to develop homes that are suitable for us here, not their vision, and to ask us to change our comp plans to suit their needs. They should be asking, what can we do to fit into here? Also, I do have a suggestion, though. Maybe this might alleviate some of the concerns, but and just to keep it as it is and do a case-by-case basis, to have developers pay into a recreational fund so we can maintain our recreational spaces. This county is in its infancy of growing. We are going to have a lot more people moving into this county, and our parks and recreations are going to slowly diminish in size. Not in size, but the amount of people it's going to be using and the needs that they're going to have. So we need to be able to maintain open space. I think it's short-sighted to allow DRAs to be used as open space. And I also think the application that brought this forward, it is a very good application. But again, DRAs are there for one thing, flood protection, and not for people to go and play in. And I ask this board to really look hard at what you're asking this board to do, is to make a comp plan amendment when things like this can be done on a case-by-case basis. Don't shortchange the people buying into these communities where you may have stay-at-home people having their kids. A lot of people don't have access to go to parks. They have to walk their children around. So I just ask you to really, really consider what we're doing here. Plan for the future. This is part of planning for the future. Don't give up our open spaces now, just so a few more homes can be built for the developer. You can always make changes. He can always make changes. But once this is on the books, it's only going to perpetuate more of the same. More sprawl, and that's all I have to say about it. I just think DRAs are not for children to play in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
I've got my notes on this, I'll give it to you. Bill Hunter, I'm from Pine Ridge. I'm not speaking for Pine Ridge. I was going to come up because I had one question. How does the allowance of DRAs to count as open space affect existing PUDs? I can see how it would affect new ones, but I live in a PUD, and we've got DRAs and we have open space, and I don't know all the percentages, but I'm envisioning, okay, does that mean that as of today, it changes, or does someone have to change a PUD to make it, to make that change. I just appreciate if there were a little information about that before it goes to the BOCC. But the dialogue here caused me to think of a couple other things. Every time I've watched you folks deal with an application, there's been something that was being pushed. I only need 90 parking places. Perfect example, thank you. Something is always being pushed. So whatever the number is, someone will be pushing it. So I encourage you to keep firm numbers and really question, can this be accommodated, these needs? And Mr. Stillwell is very, very good at telling you how desperate these needs are. But can't you deal with these needs on a case-by-case basis? I also sense that we're moving towards DRAs being the playgrounds, as this young lady just said. It seems like a slippery slope to where, okay, now you live in a community where your DRAs, your drainage is your open space, is your playground, your recreation area. That just doesn't seem right. I don't have near as much experience as Mr. Stillwell, and I've watched him. He is good. But I got to tell you, from where I live, I don't see the Withlacoochee natural areas as being part of my community. When I drive around in Pine Ridge, I look at Pine Ridge, and the open space in Pine Ridge is our open space. I know there's a ton of other open space in the county, but that's not what I see every day and every week and every month. So it's open space within my community that I'd really be concerned about. Also, in deference to Mr. Stillwell, I wholeheartedly agree with him. Forcing a large open space requirement on affordable housing makes it difficult. But what's being built in Citrus County is not affordable housing. It's market rate, and it's high-end market rate that's coming in. Please, when you look at affordable housing, create incentives just for affordable housing that meets the criteria for affordable housing. Because what's being built today is not affordable housing. So thank each one of you for everything you do. Thanks for volunteering and serving.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table for discussion and possible motion. Any further comments from any of the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
we've heard Mr. Stillwell talk about the amount of total open space in Citrus County, almost as if that was a bad thing. I think that's mainly the reason everybody moved up here, was the open space. As numerous of our speakers have said, increasing density can happen by coming before this board, by the decree of the county commissioners, however. Okay, but to change our standard, to make that as a starting spot, to reduce our requirements, I think is wrong, and I think will lead us to the wrong place. Okay, I think if we have a tough standard, the developers know we have a tough standard, they come in here and for some reason they can't meet it or don't want to meet it and can convince us or the county commission not to meet it, well, that's the case-by-case basis. And so, again, whatever I've heard here just reinforces my opinion that we should not diminish our requirements, whether it be for mobile homes, RV parks, or permanent housing. That's my statement.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, there was a few suggestions. I saw Joanna jotting some, potential changes down. Can we review that, or are we still just taking the initial offering as presented.
It's up to you. I'm sorry, it's up to you.
I'll preface my
Right.
question by saying I'm generally in favor of this.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want some changes on here, you certainly can propose them. I heard discussion about the mobile home parks, removing the 20% minimum and changing it to the maximum amount with 10% rec, and also for RV parks, the minimum of 30% was removed to proposed maximum amount. Heard some discussion on maybe not liking those items. And then also the, removing the 20% unless part of an approved PUD. But I've heard back and forth, so it's up to y'all.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I would just like to respond to Ms. Estes and Mr. Hunter. I don't think this board is saying we want children to play in DRAs. That's not the purpose of this change. The DRAs will still be there for flood protection and the reasons why they're there. What we're saying is we would like for that open space, I mean, a DRA is essentially vast open space, and you heard Mr. Stillwell talk about the number of acres that it is required sometimes in some of these larger projects for DRAs. We're just changing the comp plan to allow those large open spaces to be part of the calculation toward the open space of the development. So that's all I wanted to respond to their concerns there, and I'm still in favor of the changes. And also another thing, I think the change here, you talked about incentives for affordable housing. I think that the change that we're making here that says an approved planned development can have 10% open space is actually an incentive for affordable housing. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would agree with Commissioner Worthington on the affordable housing along with Mr. Stillwell. I think as an exception for affordable housing, the 10% is reasonable. The rest of it is not. I also have a comment on the open space shall be encouraged or connected to additional open space. There's more things using the corridors of open space than just people, and they require a little bit more connection than trying to make it across a parking lot in the middle of the night with dogs after them. So I would definitely like that to be struck out as well and return to its original statement, item C of 317.5.
Anyone else? So
It may be easier to break it down then on votes, because obviously there's different viewpoints on
Yes.
each section.
okay, so why don't we do it each one as Exhibit A? We have a motion. We'll take it as each exhibit, so there's no questions. We have a motion for Exhibit A.
Motion to approve the change to CPA-22-01 Exhibit A.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Hang on, are we doing this right? Like, cause this is one, I'm ready just to make a motion to approve the entire thing.
Yes, this feels
You
wrong.
can do that. I really just wanted to talk about changes you might want in between.
Okay.
And we can
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
Like, were there any changes proposed to Exhibit A? I didn't catch those if there were.
No, there's none there, but I figured if we
Okay.
do it each individual one, then there's no question as to,
And we can do it either way. Exhibit B, the open space shall be encouraged, was proposed for removal by at least one member to continue. The open space shall connect to adjacent open space to create networks and corridors of larger areas. So it's up to DL. Is there consensus?
I have no change for that.
I have no change.
Is there
Are we talking about no change to the change or?
No change
No
to
change
the
to the
change.
change.
No
Change.
change, yes. So do we have a consensus of that or no?
No, I don't agree to that. I can agree with B and D to the proposed changes. Those are fine. The item C, I would like to see remain just as it is.
So I think Mr. Chair will need to get a show of hands or a vote on this one.
okay. Can we have a
Do a
motion?
consensus, just do a consensus.
Consensus is
Yeah.
fine,
All right.
right?
We'll go one by one. Commissioner Barnes, in favor or against, as is?
I'm against the word encouraged.
Okay, Worthington,
As is.
Bramlett,
As is.
Facemeyer,
As is.
Stone,
Remove encouraged.
As is.
and I can go as is, so it will stay as is.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
And then for the last one, we had several things. So the mobile home parks are removing the requirement for 20% and changing it to a maximum amount. And RV parks removing the minimum of 30% and changing it to maximum amount as part of a master plan that y'all see. So is there consensus on that one?
Commissioner Barnes,
I agree.
Commissioner Worthington?
I'm confused. What are we doing here? Are we leaving it as is?
We're leaving it as noted in red on 17.3.
Okay, as is.
You're voting for the change.
And the changes, can we review
The
that?
changes for mobile home parks, it currently requires 20%. It would require a maximum amount with at least 10% as rec. And RV parks, it currently requires 30%. It would change to a maximum amount.
Okay. Commissioner Bramblett,
As is.
Commissioner Facemeyer,
As is.
Commissioner Stone,
I think at one time Joanna said that we could retain the 20% for mobile home parks and 30% for RV parks.
That's why we're getting a consensus if you want to do that or not.
I would still like to do that. So far, we've got 2 against and 1 for change. So.
I
okay.
agree with Kurt Stone.
And Mr. Bass? It looks like it's already
It's
positive
4 to 2,
anyway,
so my vote wouldn't matter, but
Right.
I would agree with Commissioner Stone and Commissioner Scraggs. So it's still, sorry, moves forward as is.
And then the remaining changes, I think the affordable housing with the 10%, there wasn't any question on that, but requiring 20% open space unless part of an approved planned unit development, and not allowing constructed drainage facilities to be included. So I think those are actually 2 different items. I think it's up to you. I'm not trying to complicate it.
All right, so why don't we just do it as a global and see where we stand. So on 1715.11, Commissioner Barnes in favor as is.
As is, yes.
Commissioner Worthington,
Yes, as is.
Commissioner Bramblett,
As is.
Commissioner Facemeyer,
As is.
Commissioner Stone,
Change.
Commissioner Scraggs,
As is.
and I go with as is. So can we now have a motion
Yes.
on all of the proposed changes made
Right.
by?
It
And I
sounds like
think-
they all,
Yeah, it's actually as written.
all of them changed.
As written, so then
Yep.
we need a motion to
Yes,
send
so
this on to the board.
for the purpose of a motion.
As amended, or as modified.
I don't think it's been modified. I think the consensus is there weren't any changes to the proposed tax.
Right. Okay.
And so there's no conditions on this, right? It's just.
Right, it's simply as
It is
the
a-
text,
okay.
text forward.
The Planning and Development Commission finds application number CPA-22-01 consistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and the Citrus County Land Development Code, and that this board recommends approval of the application to the Board of County Commissioners based upon the evidence and testimony presented and the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition.
Do we have a second?
A second.
We'll go with Commissioner Barnes. We have a first and a second. First by Mr. Bramblett, second by Commissioner Barnes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
5-4 and 2 against. Thank you.
And just so you know, Commissioners, although I appreciate the wonderful viewpoints, all of it is we're putting into the minutes. We put all that in the minutes to the commission, okay? It's not obviously it's moving forward with a recommendation of approval, but your comments are well noted, and we do include those in the backup that we provide to them.
Okay. All right. With that,
And moving on, so your next meeting is the one we told you would be very long. We've actually
I
taken.
told you I gotta clean my garage out.
We've taken 2 items off, so it's no longer 8. There's only 6 now for that particular day, and
Get out by noon.
I think we've worked with all the applicants as best as we can, so you might get out here that day.
any other
Lunch.
any other comments from staff? Yes, sir.
I'm not staff. I was waiting for you to say.
All in favor of?
No, I wanted, the last meeting, we talked about the buffers. And then we were specifically talking about the existing buffers, and I had noted how the buffering was pretty much dead along a lot of these areas that are in the county. And then I was educated after the meeting to learn that the city of Inverness and the city of Crystal River actually require watering of their buffers. And I'm watching the Dan's Car Wash go up in Crystal River right there across the street from my office, and they're putting in a very, very nice buffering along the roadway, which is definitely enhances the property and the view. And you can 100% see the little watering strip that they've put in there, the little tubes. I think that should be something that we should look at on a county level.
And the land development code actually requires to maintain the buffers, and I can't recall a recent project where they haven't had irrigation as part of that. So
I'm pretty sure that project that they had there where those storage facilities did not have watering because almost every other one of their bushes were dead.
we're talking about the one on 46.
I don't want to point anybody out.
No,
It
I
was just
understand.
that particular one. I know
A
because
storage facility that may or may not have dead plants.
I drove by there and and it happens a lot. I get it. I understand. But when it's just, this is Florida. It's very dry. You know, we encourage them to put these really nice buffering in, and we want it because it enhances and it makes the community look better. But then in the county, you know, we don't require watering. And some of them, if it's not required, they're not going to do it. I get it. They're just doing it
Right.
to get past, okay, I got my approval. And then after that,
We require maintenance of existing easements and buffers. We require, not easements, buffers. So we already have in our land development code in the small box and big box standards that they do have to maintain required buffers. So it would be a matter of someone complaining and us doing that.
I just think if the cities have it, then the county should.
We'll take a look
Maybe
at their
look into it.
language. I'm not familiar with that, but I'll definitely talk to the cities and see what they have and bring it back. Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's an interesting point that you brought up, Mr. Bramlett. The only thing is, do we end up back where we are now, where the county's not allowing us to use the water the way that we would so desire in order to maintain those areas? So-
Well, you would just water subject to your restrictions. It's better than nothing.
True. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Yep.